I want us to study something together, instead of me just talking at you. I want us to study something together and then maybe get a few of your interpretations of this story. My assumption is that the majority of you do not know this story. Now, first and foremost, I want to study a text together because I don't think we do enough of that in liberal Judaism. There are so many incredible stories in our tradition, not just the ones that we learn in the Torah, but the Talmud, for example, and this one is from the Talmud, is pretty unique, and I think it will throw you off, and that's the whole reason I want to bring it to you today. So I want us to study because I think that is a skill that as Jews is really important for us to be able to have, which is to interpret our texts and figure out a way to connect them to our own lives. And then I want to do it specifically from the Talmud because the rabbis have a great creative mind. And especially this one, you're going to see at the very beginning, we have this character which I assume you would never connect with Judaism, Satan. And Satan shows up actually a lot in Jewish texts. It's not the Satan of the Christian tradition. Satan in Hebrew means the adversary. And so throughout Jewish texts, really Satan is a character from God who is sent to teach a character a lesson about how they can be a better person. So it's not necessarily a negative force in the way that we would think about it in a Christian way, but I want us to study this text together, and I want to hear what you have to say about it. So I'm going to read it out loud, and then I'm going to break it down a little, some of the things that stand out to me, and then I want to hear if anyone else has any ideas, okay? Hopefully we have enough copies, or please feel free to share with the people near you. Pelimo used to say every day, "An arrow in Satan's eyes." One day, it was the eve of Yom Kippur. Satan disguised himself as a poor man and went and called out at Pelimo's door. Bread was brought out to him. He pleaded, "On such a day when everyone is within, shall I be out?" Thereupon he was taken in and bread was offered him. "On a day like this," he urged, "when everyone sits at the table, shall I sit alone?" He was led and sat down at the table. As he sat, his body suddenly was covered with suppurating sores, and he behaved repulsively. They told him, "Sit properly." They gave him a glass of liquor, and he coughed and spat phlegm into it. They scolded him. He fell and died. Then Pelimo heard people crying out, "Pelimo has killed a man! Pelimo has killed a man!" He fled and hid in the bathroom. Satan followed him, and he fell before him. And when Satan saw how Pelimo was suffering, he disclosed his identity. He asked Pelimo, "Why have you been cursing me?" Pelimo asked, "Then how should I speak?" And Satan said to him, "You should say, 'May the merciful one rebuke Satan.'" The end. So clear, right? It's a very clear story, right? Like most Talmudic stories, it takes a little bit of unpacking to really understand what's going on here, okay? Pelimo used to say every day, "An arrow in Satan's eyes." In other words, this is a story about a man who has complete spiritual blindness. He thinks he is holier than thou, and that Satan has nothing on him. He is such a good man that every day he wakes up and says, "There is nothing in this world that I can't handle. I am such a good person that I got it. I got this," right? And so already we know that Pelimo's character, and of course, we are supposed to imagine ourselves in Pelimo's place as well. How many times do we get up in the day and say, "I got this. I'm doing really well in life. I'm being the best person I can be"? Well, one day it was the eve of Yom Kippur, and that's the reason I'm bringing this here. Yes, it's Rosh Hashanah, but it means that this is the time of year where we are supposed to be focusing on tshuva, on trying to be better people. Here, on the eve of Yom Kippur, when everyone gathers together in the house, getting ready for a nice meal before they're going to fast for 24 hours, that's the setting. We know that this is going to be a story about tshuva from that one line. This is a story about how Pelimo needs to figure out a new way of being, that something is going wrong with the way he lives his life. Satan disguised himself as a poor man and went and called out at Pelimo's door. Right? This is a story about calling Pelimo out. This is a story to remind us sometimes we need to be called out. We're not as good as we sometimes think we are. Bread was brought out to him. He pleaded, "On such a day when everyone is within, shall I be out?" Thereupon he was taken in, and bread was offered him. To me, this is the key question of the entire story. This is what the story is about, in my opinion. When everyone is within, shall I be out? Who is in and who is out? Who are we excluding? Who are we including? When are we the person who is on the inside? And whether we know it or not, we're excluding people. And one of those moments where we feel like we are on the outside and everyone else seems to be in. That seems to be the crux of what's going on here, and one of the challenges that Pelimo has and that we all have. The in and the out, the boundaries of what we're willing to open up our hearts and minds to and what we're closed off to. On a day like this, he urged, when everyone sits at the table, shall I sit alone? He was led and sat down at the table. As he sat there, his body suddenly was covered with suppurating sores, and he behaved repulsively, and they told him, sit properly. So first, the idea of sitting down at the table. If you may or may not know, the Shabbat table is supposed to remind us of the sacrificial altar at the temple. That was a place a long time ago where we would sacrifice those animals to God and connect to God through those sacrifices. And the Shabbat table became the place where we are supposed to imagine that we are sacrificing a piece of ourselves to enter into Shabbat, because it's not easy to kind of just stop and put on the brakes. We have to sacrifice that momentum that seems to be pushing us further and further to go, 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 make, make, make. So the table is the setting in which we are supposed to recognize that there are sacrifices that are supposed to take place at the table. And here they tell him, sit properly. Don't make a mess. Don't rock the boat. How many times where we are confronted by people or ideas and we just say, I just don't want to deal with that. Just sit properly. Don't rock the boat. Don't cause problems. It's much easier. Let's just ignore it, put on the blinders, and not deal with it. That seems to be what's happening in Pelimo's home. They are shutting themselves off to the fact that here is this person who came into the house. He is not like them at all. They want him out, and even when he's in, they are telling him, you have to act a certain way. Just sit there properly. Don't be yourself. Be the way we want you to be in this moment, the way we declare you should be. They gave him a glass of liquor, and he coughed and spat phlegm into it, and they scolded him. We don't want to be bothered by other people's weaknesses or their problems sometimes. We don't want to deal with that. It goes back to what we were talking about with the Unatana Tokef. You don't want to imagine what someone else is dealing with. So here, they even go so far as to scold him. And even though he is in pain, they're saying, don't do that in front of us. I don't want to see your pain. And right now, I feel like we are living in a world where we don't want to be seeing other people's pain because we can barely deal with our own pain, let's be honest. And so to be confronted by other people's pains, I can't deal with that. Don't do that for me. Don't give me your stuff. Keep your stuff to yourself. I can't deal with my own stuff, let alone yours. That seems to be what's happening right here in the story. And he fell and died. And then Pelimo heard people crying out, Pelimo has killed a man. Pelimo has killed a man. And where does Pelimo go? He fled and hid in the bathroom. Not where you would imagine he would run, especially it is Kol Nidre. Why is he not running to the synagogue to try and become a better person? Of all the places he's going to go to the bathroom? By the way, back then, not everyone had a bathroom in their home. We're supposed to imagine that in the time of this story, that there was a collective communal bathroom, not in his house, but somewhere close by to his house. So where does he run? He runs to the bathroom. We all know what happens in the bathroom. But actually, if you think about it, incredibly, the bathroom is probably the place of most equality. Really, when you think about it, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter your status. When everyone's in that bathroom, there are beautiful bathrooms here, so feel free to use it. When you are in that bathroom and you are vulnerable, we are all as close to equal as it gets in a very interesting way. And so of all the places, Pelimo goes to the place where, yes, it is filthy, it is disgusting, and at the same time, it is in that place of filth and disgustingness, that place that we don't want to be, that actually we can find something of equality. Satan followed him and fell before him. And when Satan saw how Pelimo was suffering, he disclosed his identity. He asked Pelimo, "Why have you been cursing me?" And Pelimo asked, "Then how should I speak?" Another very important point right here. Finally, Pelimo does something right. What does he do? He asks a question. Up until this point, he has not asked any questions. How are we supposed to improve ourselves? How are we supposed to improve our relationships? How are we supposed to improve the world if we are walking around assuming we have the answers, we have the way, we know how to do it? Most people aren't listening to the way we are telling them to do it, but we know how to do it. But if you're not asking questions, you're not actually opening up your hearts and minds to figuring out how we can actually change what's going on around us. Finally, Pelimo asks a question, and he finally opens the door to the possibility of change, because teshuvah, as we know, is of course repentance in most of the ways we were translated, but it is a return to our deepest selves, and that requires us to ask questions of ourselves. Who am I? Where am I flawed? What can I do better? What am I going to change? And then finally Satan says to him, "You should say, may the merciful one rebuke Satan." That none of us are holier than thou. Don't believe that you have the power. God is the only one really who's going to be able to rebuke this Satan character. Recognize your limitations. Recognize that you are not going to be able to do it all yourself. And that's the story. So those are just some of my thoughts. I'm curious, what stands out to you? By the way, obviously I gave you some discussion questions for the Rosh Hashanah dinner table later tonight. But what's going on here? What stands out to you? Why did the rabbis tell this story? And what's something that stands out to you? Well, hold on. We need to mic you up. Please stand up, share your name. Yeah.
Say no. Oh, it's Alan Kay, not the insurance guy. Anyway, this reminds me of Fiddler on the Roof. Alms for the poor, alms for the poor, and he looks in the cup and he says, 1 kopeck? He says, last week you gave me 2 kopecks. He says, business wasn't so good. So since business wasn't so good, I should suffer. That's right. It sounds like it comes right out of A Fiddler on the Roof. It basically says that they're asking people to bring themselves up and beyond the situation, okay? Depending on what you do. If you're in the healing arts and there's plenty of patients that come into hospitals that nobody even wants to touch. Police don't even want to pick up the homeless because they foul up the cop cars. They are afraid of a disease. So they're basically saying to society, you can't ignore it. You better learn to deal with it and get it fixed.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Vivi.
My name is Vivi, and I just think it's interesting how he never tells, what's his name, Pelimo, not to curse him. He's just saying, curse me in a different way that doesn't give you the power.
Okay, yeah. So why is that important?
I just think it's interesting that he never tries to change his mind. He's like, you can hate me, but because Satan is kind of an angel, right? Yeah. So he's essentially saying, be a better Jew. You can still be a Jew and hate me, but you shouldn't assume that you have the power to change what I'm doing.
Great. Future rabbi.
Michael. So Judaism tells us that it's very important what we say. And this starts off with a story of someone who says every day that he wants something to happen to someone else without thinking. And that's what triggers this whole process from the very beginning. Because when he's confronted with the Satan coming, they don't do it happily, but they do the right thing. They do offer him food. They do bring him in. But the point is that it's very important what we say and how we think each day, and not to take those things for granted, and that our words have an impact, and they have an effect on the world itself, and that we need to really think about that on a daily basis in terms of what we want to happen to others and what we have a right to afflict others with. And I think that Satan's response, which is to say, this is not really appropriate for you to be saying what should happen to me, that it is up to a higher force, is I think an important lesson as we hit Yom Kippur.
I'm Danielle Miller. What struck me about this story is that Pelimo doesn't seem interested in modifying his behavior or his thinking until there's a societal pressure to rethink his approach. And although sometimes that societal pressure can be for the negative, here it's for the positive, and it occurs to me that the community in which he exists helps improve him individually and helps improve the collective.
Hi, Jacob. So I noticed on the they, with the part that refers to them as they, that they cry out that Pelimo has killed a man, but in everywhere else it says they gave him the glass of liquor and they scolded him. So while the community is telling him how to be better, they're also focusing on Pelimo and not themselves as a collective.
There's so many good ones. We could do this all afternoon, but we'll only take one or two more.
I have a question, Rena. I have a question for you, Rabbi. I couldn't help but read this and then also think of the Deoraita, the non-rabbinical law of cursing and blotting out the name of Amalek. I mean, we have plenty of instances within Judaism where we are supposed to judge something that is considered sinister or evil and to curse it. So it seemed a little bit at odds with other commandments or other pressures that we have within Judaism.
Great point. My short answer is Amalek represents complete evil that can't be changed at all. Amalek was a force that came from behind the Israelites as they're wandering through the desert and decided to pick off the weak and the young and the vulnerable, and their entire goal was to destroy the Jewish people. Satan, on the other hand, is a force basically of good from God, to basically say, you can be better, because we don't believe that there's the hell character in the way Satan exists in Christianity. So this is really just a reminder that this is a force to tell us, look, it's not about blotting out Satan, it's not about blotting out Satan, it's really about how can we improve ourselves. Different than Amalek. Last one.
I'm Jaden. I noticed that it said that he fell and died, but then everybody as a society began saying that Pelimo killed somebody, and it struck me because while technically it was a fake death, it was a theatrical death, the society as a whole then decided to blame the person who had let Satan into his house and given him food and wine because he did treat Satan badly. They took it as he was the one killing him instead of how he died on his own accord. It was just kind of interesting on how they phrased it.
Right, they put the blame on Pelimo, even though up until that point, Pelimo actually has nothing to do, at least in the story, with the character itself. We're going to stop there, but I want to say, not only are your interpretations wonderful, but this is the beauty of our tradition, that all of these incredible ideas, that it doesn't matter, it matters, okay, a little about what I say, but really, it matters that you have the power to be able to take these texts and interpret them for yourself. So I want you to take this text. I want you to struggle with it. And I want you to see that our tradition is saying, use this time of year to really dig in. When are you on the ins and when are you on the outs? How are you treating other people? How are you imagining yourself? And how can we return to some of the questions we should be asking ourselves in order to improve ourselves and the world around us? Shana Tova.